So the episode continues with Hawkeye and Kate getting caught, and we have an awkward table conversation scene, and I gotta say, this comedic moment did not work at all. These kind of awkward scenes can be funny, and have been funny in so many other movies and TV shows, but it feels very staged and forced here, and it feels like this scene thinks it's so much funnier than it actually is. They see Clint out, and the mother has a nice conversation with him saying that she doesn't want her daughter to get hurt going out on missions with him, and he assures her that her daughter will be safe. Yeah, despite the nice conversation, I am still suspecting that she is the evil one and not Mustache Twirler here. The trip wasn't a complete bust, however, as Clint ended up getting the Ronin sword back. He then has a conversation with his wife, and he says he's gonna come back home late again, and I like how the kids are disappointed. It keeps the feeling alive that you want him to get back home in time for Christmas, which is funny to me because I thought I wouldn't care about that, but I still do. Then we cut back to Kate and her family, and they have a little family time. And then we see a little dance scene. This actress, Vera Farmiga, gets a lot of dancing scenes in the stuff I've seen her in. The Conjuring 2, Bates Motel, and now in Hawkeye. And the idea of this scene is that Kate is here with her family, and Hawkeye is all alone without his family. And feeling bad for him, Kate comes in to keep him company and have some Christmas time. And Hawkeye really appreciates it, and even thanks her for it, which was another really nice moment between the two.
That's very thoughtful of you. Thanks.
And then he tells her that her stepfather is involved with the tracksuit gang, and then they try to come up with a plan. That doesn't work out, so they watch a movie, eat snacks, and talk, whilst also coming up with superhero ideas. And again, it's a very nice scene. He even gives her some advice regarding the arrows, and they set up the Christmas decorations, and he even teaches her a trick, which I am sure will come back later. Then she asks him what is the best arrow shot he took, and he says it's the one he didn't take, and then we find out that the arrow he didn't take was on a woman, and I immediately knew that he was talking about Black Widow, and I didn't see it coming. But we have another emotional scene that was not cut off by a dumb joke. I really am starting to love this show. This is the kind of emotional weight and tone that I have wanted from the MCU for years, and aside from the Russo brothers, it never really happened that often. So I really appreciate seeing the emotional depth in this show. Really I do. And through this conversation, Kate learns that Clint lost his family during the blip, and he almost relives the sadness of the situation a little. And then she asks him if that's where he met Ronan. Then she puts together that he was the Ronin, and that surprised me. I didn't think that she would figure that out so quickly, so I do find issue with that. But I like how the conversation continued. It again was a serious conversation, and as much as she says that those days are behind him, he essentially tells her that they are not behind him and that he feels like he needs to still pay for them. So yeah, I thought this scene would just be a small emotional moment, but then the scene continues and gives us even more of an emotional moment. And I thought that the scene was over and that we would get back to some humor, and then the scene keeps going for a little longer and shows that Clint is still haunted by his past actions during the blip. Honestly, if this show was a physical being, I would give it a hug. Who would have thought that the most emotional MCU show would be Hawkeye? This show is showing the ramifications of the blip far better than everything else out of the MCU shows. After that, Hawkeye gives Echo's henchman a visit and tells him to tell her that Ronan is dead. The two set out on a mission, and Kate enters a room to get the Rolex watch, and it turns out that someone is in the room with her, and they have been taking notes on Clint's family, and that person is Maya. She ends up fighting Kate, and then also someone is fighting Clint. He thinks it is also Maya, when really, it's obvious that it's going to be Black Widow's sister, Yelena. So we have another action scene, and I gotta say, this action scene was nothing special. It probably felt the most like a TV show action scene, whereas the rest of the action felt a level above that. The fight ends with Hawkeye taking off Yelena's mask, and it turns out that it is her. Clint finds out that a Black Widow agent was sent after him, and he tells Kate that this has gotten too real too fast, and that the two cannot be partners, and he tells her to go home. I really do like how the stakes went up, and this scene got so serious, and the episode ends, and I gotta say, I was going to say that this episode was really nothing special, but the last 2 minutes of the episode made all the difference, and this episode ended in a dark place, and because I waited 2 weeks, I can go straight to episode 5, and by the way, I loved the music during the credits of this episode. It further illustrates how dangerous things have suddenly become, and it gives you a very nice shift of tone. So yeah, because of that ending, this episode gets a really good 7 out of 10. So this episode opens with a little more backstory for Yelena. We see that she's helping another mind-controlled Black Widow agent, only to find out that she is not really mind-controlled. After a brief conversation, she goes to the bathroom and then she disappears and then reappears with the blip, which I did not expect to see. Instantaneously, 5 years go by for her and we see her back with her Black Widow friend 5 years later, and she is then told what happened, and after realizing that in 5 seconds she has missed 5 years of her life, she wants to go find Natasha to tell her that she is okay. But of course, the only reason she is back is because of Natasha's sacrifice in Endgame. And I gotta say, this was a very good and effective way of showing you how Yelena was affected by the blip and how she found out her sister died. But I still don't like how she didn't learn that Black Widow died sacrificing herself for the world. I still think having Yelena fight Hawkeye feels like a forced conflict that was very badly set up. She should know the details of how her sister died. The Avengers should have told everyone. So Kate comes back home all injured and she breaks down and tells her mother that she is not working with Hawkeye anymore. And this, to me, was exactly the same as the scene in Homecoming where Peter comes home and breaks down to his parental figure that his superhero mentor dropped him. Only difference is, this scene in Hawkeye is so much better and more emotional to me. And this conversation Kate has with her mother was really nice. She then tells her mother about how Jack is connected to the tracksuit mafia, and her mother agrees to look into it, but most likely she is the one doing all this stuff and is using her new fiance as the fall guy. Kate finds the location to Yelena, and Yelena was expecting her to show up and knows exactly who Kate is. And Yelena is being surprisingly quirky, in the MCU kind of way, after she just fought her the night before.
Well, I was starving and you took forever, so I wanted to make food.
It does feel like Yelena is in her own Disney Marvel comedy, and Kate is in this more serious show and is taking the situation a lot more seriously. Although I do like the joke when she says, "If I wanted to kill you, I would have done it already."
If I wanted to kill you, I
You would have already.
Right as you open the door.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't have even had time to shut it.
No.
I'd have been dead.
No.
Yeah, okay.
That playful joke made me laugh, and so did Yelena's delivery of it. Then she admits that she is here to kill Clint, and the conversation gets more serious on both sides. Yelena talks about his dark past, and Kate tries to defend him. And by the way, what proof does Yelena even have that he killed Natasha, besides the word of this obviously untrustworthy person? Yelena finally asks her where he is, and Kate says that she doesn't know, and then Yelena leaves and warns Kate not to get in her way again. My guess is that she's going to follow Kate and have her lead her to Hawkeye. We then see that Mustache Twirler is being arrested. He is very calm about it and says that he is being framed, which I believe that he is, by his fiancée, because there is no twist or surprise here if he was the villain, and it would be very anticlimactic, so it's obvious that it's gotta be the mother. Meanwhile, Clint takes out his hearing aid and has some words to say to Natasha, and it was another genuinely good emotional scene. He even talks about how he looks back on the moment where she died, and Jeremy Renner's performance here is so good, and he ends the conversation by saying that he is sorry for what he is going to do. I'm assuming that he is going to try and kill her sister, but I don't know what he's apologizing for here, really. Maybe we'll find out. So Clint sends a message to the overly goofy and unfunny tracksuit duo, and then he calls his wife with a serious conversation, and he tells her about everything that is happening, including that Echo knows who his family is and that a Black Widow agent is after him. And he even mentions the big guy who can potentially show up. It's obvious that he's talking about the Kingpin, so they are still building him up. I really hope they do him justice, really I do. And his wife is being very supportive, which is cool. I did not expect that. I expected the same family drama that we have seen so many times, which wouldn't have been a bad thing, but some unexpected stuff like this is nice too. Clint shows up where he told Echo to meet and he takes out her thugs, and he does it with some style. It's like he's going back to his Ronin style, only I doubt he is killing any of them. He takes out all of her people and then shows up in the Ronin costume with the sword, and the two have a decent fight, and he ultimately wins. And then the two have a talk, and he says that her boss wanted her father dead. Her boss, of course, being the Netflix Kingpin. She tries to kill him, and then Kate shows up and protects him. The two have another funny exchange, and then they escape. And Echo has some stuff to think about now, and she's asking questions. We cut back to Kate and Hawkeye, and she tells him that she spoke to the Black Widow that tried to kill him, and that she is Natasha's sister. And Hawkeye immediately knows her name.
Yelena.
Yeah.
We then cut to Yelena, who is following Kate's mum. She texts Kate and tells her that she now knows who hired her, and she tells her that it's her mum, with the Kingpin. And Hawkeye pretty much confirms what we've all been thinking this whole time and says,
Well, that's the guy I've been worried about this whole time. Kingpin.
Then the credits hit, and the intense music that the episode ends on to emphasize the horror of what we just saw is the "You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch" song.
You're a mean one, Mr. Grinch.
So yeah, apart from that bad song choice, this was another good episode, but it definitely feels more like a build-up to the final episode. So this episode is more of a low 7 out of 10, and I was right. The mother is not as innocent as she is let on. It turns out that she is the one that put the hit on Hawkeye, and she is also working with the Kingpin. And I can imagine that this will be very hard for Kate, so this again will further develop her character. So, it's time to watch the final episode of Hawkeye. So the episode opens with a backstory that I am actually glad to see, and that is Kingpin's most recent meeting with Kate's mother. And Kingpin even has his cane with him this time as well, which is taken directly from the comics, and we see the conversation that he has with Kate's mother. And as I expected all this time, she did kill the old man and even framed her fiance, and now she wants to stop working for Kingpin because her daughter is getting too close, and that's where she draws the line. And we find out that the reason she was forced to do all of this is because her husband owed a lot of debt to Kingpin, and after he died, she had to pay it back or else. So I do feel the tragedy for her character in this regard. Then we cut back to Kate and Hawkeye, who have just finished watching their conversation, and both of them, but especially Kate, are surprised by this. And Clint says that Kingpin is not going to take this lightly and that her mother is in danger. I even like how Kate tells Clint to go back home to his family, to which Clint says that Kate is his partner and that her mess is his mess and that he is going to help her. That was another nice and genuine moment between the two, something this show is very good at. We then see Echo meet Kingpin, and she's clearly trying to test him and see if he really did put the hit on her father. And I like how you can see that Fisk is starting to get unstable and emotional, and he puts it together more or less immediately that Echo has turned on him. So the show is doing a very good job at maintaining his intelligence and his serious attitude from the Netflix show, which I am so relieved to see. And I like how the music is more intense when he is on screen. That really helps bring this extra level of unease to his scenes, because you know that they are not going to make him anywhere near as violent in the MCU as he was in the Netflix show. Meanwhile, Clint and Kate make some more trick arrows to get ready for their mission. Kate even tells Clint about when she first saw him when she was a kid and how he inspired her, which was a very nice scene, even if it is a bit generic in its execution. They enter the party looking for Kate's mother. Jack is here already out of prison, and Yelena shows up ready to kill Hawkeye. Kate's mother finally shows up, and Kate immediately takes her away to speak with her. She tells her mother that she knows what she did, and the two have a brief talk before the stepfather shows up. Then Hawkeye gets shot at by Fisk's people and a big fight breaks loose. Kate catches up with Yelena and tries to stop her from killing Clint, and I especially love the joke in the elevator when she tries to switch the elevator and Yelena just whacks her hand away. The humor was funny here, especially when Kate hits Yelena in the face. The joke about her planning to have her costume revealed was kind of lame though, but hey, one lame joke in this episode so far is not bad. Then the two have a fight/chase scene, and I admire their attempt at making this look like one long continuous shot, but it's very obvious when they edit jump cuts here. I also find it kind of endearing that Yelena is deliberately not fighting Kate with all her strength. It shows that despite her warning earlier, she doesn't want to hurt her. So Yelena jumps out the window and she almost got a shot at Clint. Kate quite stupidly jumps down the wire to the ground, and she landed way too hard to come out of that unscathed. She should have ended up with a broken leg, like this. Jack shows up and he even saves Kate, and she apologizes for thinking he was the bad guy. Hawkeye and Echo's thug/boyfriend or whatever have a fight, and I like how Hawkeye takes out some of the tracksuit mafia with an explosion and even defeats the guy in a really cool way. And then he also jumps out of the window and uses Yelena's wire, but it breaks and he falls into a tree and then has a strange moment with an owl. Now probably the goofiest thing of this entire show is when these guys show up as the backup, and this was too goofy. Helping people out was fine, but doing this was too goofy even for this show, and it was especially bad of the show to do this during the final episode. I do like though how Kate gets Hawkeye out of the tree, although I doubt he would fall down with no injuries to show for it. Then the two have a cool scene where they fire a bunch of arrows, and it was cool, but the slow-mo was not warranted and didn't look as cool as the show thinks it looked. Hawkeye even takes Kate's advice and wears a costume which looks really lame if you ask me. Although I will say that as fun as some of the arrows are, some of them seemed really cartoony. Overall, this action scene was okay, but I gotta say, the entire scene was completely outdone with just this one shot from Hawkeye. Damn, that was awesome. Then Yelena shows up and the two both have their fight, and Echo comes in too and fights her friend. And Yelena says before she kills him that she wants to know what happened. So yeah, the Avengers didn't put a statement out and tell everyone that Natasha died saving the world. And yet, Yelena was stupid enough to try and kill someone even though she had no information except the word of this obvious liar. For a Black Widow assassin, she is not very smart, is she?
No, I guess not.
We then see Kingpin show up and... he's apparently a lot stronger here in the MCU, and Kate shows up, and I like the way he says,
What are you gonna do with that?
he really is so good as the Kingpin. Also, how did the mother manage to so quietly drive the car away and then crash into him so fast? That was very convenient. So after Echo pleads with her friend to come with her, he ultimately chooses not to and she kills him. So we go back and forth between the fights with Hawkeye and Yelena and Kate and Kingpin, and both the fights are good. And Clint is constantly telling Yelena that Natasha sacrificed herself and she doesn't trust him. I honestly expected this conversation to go exactly like this when I saw that stinger at the end of Black Widow, and yeah, it's not that good to be honest. We cut back to the other fight, and I like how Kingpin breaks all of Kate's arrows, and then punches her around some more, and Kate is somehow able to take it. Although I do like how Kate uses the trick that Hawkeye taught her and blows up Kingpin. Although I am surprised that he got knocked out by that, considering that he survived a car crash. So Kingpin is defeated, and Kate and her mother are reunited, and I was surprised to find that Kate got her mother arrested. I mean, that's cold. That's very cold.
Even to a guy like me, that's cold.
I mean, I thought they did a very good job at making her situation understandable, so to end with her getting arrested, I don't know, I feel like there should have been more information on that. I mean, having the Kingpin on your ass is not the worst excuse to do what she did, even though it was wrong, but her being in prison during Christmas and Kate leaves her there and doesn't even visit, and just comes straight over to Hawkeye's house for Christmas, that's quite grim. Going back to Clint and Yelena, I like how he uses Natasha's whistle to get through to her. That was actually an emotional moment because what the two have in common is that they love Natasha. She offers him a hand to get up and they both go their separate ways. Kingpin escapes, which is surprising because instead of arresting the mother, they should have arrested him first. But anyway, Echo finds him and she shoots him off screen. Now he's obviously not dead. They pan the camera away, so of course they will most likely say that he grabbed the gun off of her or something. But yeah, did they really need to end his appearance on such a tease of a cliffhanger? I mean, there's no real cliffhanger here. Anyway, we cut to Christmas and Hawkeye manages to come back home in time, which is a relief to see. And I thought they were gonna do this, and they did. He brings Kate with him, as well as the dog. I like how he says he came back home with a couple of strays, that was funny. And it was so nice to see Clint back with his family after all this time. He even comes home with the watch, which turns out was his wife's the whole time and is hinting that she was part of some agency or something. Clint asks Kate to come outside and they burn the Ronin suit and put an end to that part of his life. And then the two discuss superhero names for Kate, and then the episode ends. So yeah, that was a good episode, and I really liked how it defined Kate as a character. But it wasn't great. I was definitely disappointed that we didn't see Hawkeye have an encounter or fight with the Kingpin. I mean, he was afraid of Kingpin getting involved throughout the whole season, and in the end, he didn't even get to fight him. And this is where Yelena's inclusion really did hurt this show. Because if this show wasn't trying to pay off that forced end credit scene in Black Widow, then both Clint and Kate would have fought Kingpin together, and it would have been the ultimate payoff of everything they had learned with their relationship and teamwork this season. And it would have been a much better climax, but no, they split them up, which isn't anywhere near as satisfying or rewarding as watching them both fight the Kingpin. And Jack was ultimately a nobody in this show. He was only really here to make us think he was the bad guy, when really, he was not. And I can imagine that can piss some people off, as in the comics, he is actually the person that trained Hawkeye. And here, he is just an oblivious fall guy. Why they couldn't just use a random character and they had to use this well-known character, I don't know. Marvel can be dumb sometimes. And yeah, her mother going to prison where Fisk can easily get to her, I don't know about that. This is the only sour point of the show to me where I don't really know how to feel. Having said that, this was definitely the best ending to the MCU shows, which have been very lacking thus far. So yeah, Hawkeye didn't end with a bang, but it ended satisfyingly enough. And for that, the final episode of Hawkeye gets an 8 out of 10. And as for the show overall, this was definitely the best of the MCU shows, and I cannot stress enough how I did not expect that. Not in a million years. The show I was really looking forward to the most was The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and aside from having some good moments, it really disappointed me. But Hawkeye was a much more emotional show, and it knew when to be funny, for the most part, and when to let an emotional moment have weight, and it massively benefited because of it. And that's the minimum that I have wanted from the MCU all this time, and that's what I have come away remembering about this show the most, is the emotional core that it has. The emotional core that it did not interrupt with a lame and poorly timed joke, something that the MCU just can't seem to stop doing for some reason. But my problems with the show aside, I really liked this show, and it made me very happy every time a new episode came out. And my overall score for Hawkeye is a really good 8 out of 10. This is probably the only MCU show that I would actually watch again. And that is a big compliment coming from me. I also think they did the Kingpin well in this show too. Although you can tell that they were definitely toning him down with regards to violence. Because if he was the Netflix Kingpin, he would have non-stop beaten the living crap out of Kate in a matter of seconds. But he spent way too much time throwing her around, which was out of character for him. Also, I don't know if I buy the fact that Kate would survive an encounter with Kingpin. I think that is giving her way too much credit, especially this early on in her development. I hope they really increase his level of violence in the future, because as far as the PG-13 rating goes, this didn't even push it. Not even a little bit. And Kate was getting up from his attacks too easily, almost as if it didn't even hurt her all that much. And this version of Kingpin was definitely more of a comic book version of Kingpin, as he wasn't as grounded with his strength like he was in the Netflix episodes. I am also so happy that they did not have Kingpin make any MCU jokes. He was serious and intimidating all the way through this episode, as he should be. So yeah, Hawkeye. It's my favourite MCU show, and I hope that this isn't the end of Jeremy Renner's run as Hawkeye. This really was a good show, and a wonderful surprise to close out the year. And so is the end of yet another year. Thank you all so much for watching and for continuing to watch my videos, guys. I really do appreciate each and every single one of you for sticking with me for all these years, and I never and will never stop appreciating it. As always, please do give the video a thumbs up if you liked it, and click that subscribe button and the bell icon right next to it if you haven't already, so you can stay up to date with my future videos. Also, feel free to donate to me on Patreon, as it really helps support me and keep the channel going. And be sure to follow me on Instagram so you can see my immediate thoughts on movies and TV shows that I watch when I'm not making videos. Thank you very much as always for watching, guys. I really do appreciate it, and I will see all of you very soon. Take care.